This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. Tim, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Ready to go.
Good. We were talking about just some of the conversations we've been having with our kids about AI and all these new tools and everything that's been in the news. And I've been really interested just in how you've been maneuvering that because your kids are older than mine. And so we were just talking about education and like our kids have like a classical education model right now. And so there's like almost no screens involved in that. And my kids are pretty young, which I've talked a lot to Jackie about just when and we want to shift that and think a little differently about that just because you think about how different that is than like the world we live in now and the importance of being able just knowing how to reason and think and philosophize and interact with AI because that's something we're all going to have to get better at.
Yeah, it's amazing just how rapidly things are changing and how rapidly they will change. And I think a lot of people are saying it's unprecedented in human history. A lot of our kind of big changes economically, like the Industrial Revolution, took 80 years, to really change things. Obviously, there are different sectors of the market that change as, mechanization happened and assembly lines and things like that. But you're talking about like whole industries changing and, ways of working changing in some cases in years, and in some cases even in months with some of these progressions we're seeing with these LLMs and these different AI agents. And it's pretty incredible. And I don't know that anyone really fully understands what the impact is going to be. But my son's 15 or almost 15. And so we've had a lot of conversations because I listen to a lot of podcasts and I'm using a lot of these AI tools and he's starting to use them too. And I think it's pretty important for kids to understand these things and to learn about them. Mark Cuban has said that if he was young, he would literally be like, all he would be doing would be learning about AI just because of how transformative it is. And so is a dark side to it for sure. And there's a lot of bad stuff that, kids could get into that I think you want to be careful of. But I think understanding the tools that are out there and what will be valuable as they grow older, what skill set will be valuable because he goes to a great school. It's a private Christian school. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of the education is almost like based in the 90s. Like, what would you have needed to do if you were growing up in the 90s and you're going to go to college? And a lot of it is just a lot of memorization, a lot of learning processes, being able to get information and kind of regurgitate on test. And, I just think so much of that now is going to change with AI. Where AI is so good at processes, so good at pattern recognition. It has all the information. And so really what is needed is creativity and ingenuity and thinking outside the box. And we haven't really rewarded that very much in school. There hasn't really been a way to teach that, at least in kind of the typical formal education that, that we see in the marketplace. So I'm trying to help him understand, how can he do things on the side to learn and apply things? He's really into the stock market and investing and reading and learning about that. But I think what I have talked to him, because it's almost like hard. And I think a lot of young people, whether they're high school or junior high or especially college, you're starting to hear these predictions about like, AI is going to take over a lot of the medical field. You're not going to need like a typical doctor for a lot of things because AI will be better at diagnosing sickness or illness. And, you think about, it feels like the CPA field, think about our business, and brokerage, just, who knows what the disruption is. But I think for a young person, it's really shaking them up because they're like, I'm working so hard. And I've been told like, work hard in school, get good grades, go to college, and you're going to get a job. And is that going to be there for me, in 5 years or 10 years when I'm ready? And so what I've been encouraging him, because he's having a hard time, like, why am I doing some of these classes? Why am I learning some of this stuff? I can just put in ChatGPT and it just gives it to me. And so I've been telling him like, it's so important to learn in life, to do hard things and to grow. And, growth is always a hard process. There's always some pain. There's always some things you don't want to do. And And I think a big part of the future is going to be learning these tools and learning the different technologies and how to apply them, being able to make decisions on what is valuable and what's not valuable, which he already has that ability, I think, to see what's useful and what's not useful. And that's going to be a really critical skill. But anyway, it's been some interesting conversations. I'm trying to encourage him and motivate him because I think it's hard for a lot of young people right now with how quickly things are changing.
Yeah, though I think that's so interesting what you said. I really like what you said about doing hard things because I think that's great advice. It's good advice for all of us because I think there's a tendency in human nature that you're going to achieve and get to a point where you can coast and it's going to be easy, or it's the idea of just everything always is improving. But I don't know where that comes from because in life is just like one challenge after another. And I think that's because God wants us to put our trust in him more than he wants us to just be, I found the right path where I'm going to be successful or I'm going to be happy or whatever it is. And you just never can just at the end of the day, just trust in your circumstances because their circumstances are always changing. But AI is really interesting and it feels really different than, the internet or smartphones or just the different things that have happened in the past. Because like you said, I remember being a kid with math and being like, why do I have to know some of this? Because like I can just use a calculator, and then ultimately when you get into higher education, you do just use a calculator. But it's still good to know like how it worked. But now with AI agents and ChatGPT and all that, it's like it's kind of like having a calculator for anything.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible. And so I could see if I was 15 and I was like going into high school, it would be hard to kind of have that motivation because a lot of that would come from the place of, I just don't know what's going to be important. And I think we've already seen and heard about some disruption, we're just, it used to be that if you were like a coder, that was like one of the most valuable things you could be. And I say used to be, that wasn't that long ago, that was like extremely valuable. But then that's actually been one of the very first things that has been replaced with all these new advancements.
I think Elon Musk said this is the year that coding ends. That like the coder dies this year or becomes obsolete. So that's a great point of how fast, because I think that there was a point where people are saying, well, with AI, there's going to be driverless trucks. You won't need truckers anymore. So let's just teach them all coding. And now it's like, well, coding's not going to work either. So what are we going to do? But I think it's a really good point to think about, throughout probably most history. It was like work hard in school, develop this skill set when you're young, whether maybe it's your trade or, it's some kind of formal education, go to college and then get a job. And then once you develop this skill set, you can just kind of use that skill set for the next 30 or 40 years, the rest of your career, and you can have value because of that. It's like, someone gets to my age, I'm 44, I've developed this skill set now for 22, 23 years doing this. For most of history, it'd be like, all right, I don't need to change at all. I can just keep doing this now and coast the next 15 or 20 years and make a lot of money. But we're in a new time now where someone like me needs to engage with this new technology, needs to adapt, needs to grow, needs to maybe discard some things that worked in the past that maybe aren't going to be as valuable anymore. Needs to think about, how do I create value now? Not how did I create value in the past? And, there is like a little bit of the sense of entitlement that I shouldn't have to adopt these new things, or maybe I'm just going to be afraid of it and sit back and not grow. Just hope that it's not really that real, or it's not going to be that impactful, and I can just keep doing what I'm doing. And, that's not going to work, unfortunately, in the future, that kind of mindset.
Well, and like you said, there's definitely, especially when going back to talking about kids and their interaction with AI, there's definitely a lot of really negative sides to that as well. I mean, it is a tool, and the tool can be used negatively or positively, but I think you've seen it with social media and a lot of what's come out around social media and how negative that is for kids. I'm just really thankful that I didn't grow up really in a time where there was a whole lot of social media, at least not like with a smartphone and not like it is now. And there's all the different ones. And I've never been a huge social media person anyways, but you see the studies done on how that's impacting kids and relationships and a lot of the issues we have. And now these agents that kids can interact with and are interacting with, that can be pretty scary. And I think I've heard of, some parents allowing their kids to interact with them unsupervised, which I think is really dangerous. Because kids just don't know. I mean, they can be used for incredible things, and there's incredible advancements I think we can have because of it. And then I think there's also, like you said, a pretty dark side to it too. So I've been trying to start talking to my kids just about what it is, but they're not interacting with it at all. directly, because I don't want them like talking to ChatGPT, or at the end of the day, I want my kids coming to me. I don't want them going to ChatGPT. But I was listening to a podcast where the guy was like, he has his kids go to ChatGPT instead of him. I was like, that's
crazy.
That is not a good place to be. Just don't set yourself up for that.
Well, I think what we want to talk about today, kind of is in line with this. And, we're talking about using AI as a tool, but not relying on it. So you're not using it as a crutch, but you're actually becoming a better person who's growing and developing as a person. Your character, your work ethic, just kind of in every aspect of your life. And then ChatGPT or these different LMs, these different AI tools can help you achieve the things you want to achieve. But I think what you're pointing out with kids, and I think with adults too, is there's going to be a huge temptation for it to be a crutch. Actually, instead of using it to grow, the people are not going to grow. People are going to completely atrophy and be kind of passive and sit back and maybe just do whatever the LLM is telling them. It's like, I'm just going to take it as truth, whatever it tells me, and I'm just going to kind of be passive. And so I know what we want to talk about today was this idea of kind of burnout, and versus being on mission or having passion or having purpose, and I think that's a big thing people talk a lot about in our culture. Definitely something we see, just being people that are in a career that are middle-aged, that, being entrepreneurs and going through all the challenges that you go through. So maybe we can just kind of start talking about that. Just, there are a lot of people who are saying, hey, I'm burned out. This is just tough, especially when you just have all these different challenges that come at us. And then, you also have people who are talking about, find your passion, find your mission, be excited to get out of bed in the morning and go do whatever that is that you're passionate about.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of Matt Rotan told me, this was like when I first started in the business, he was like, what separates the good brokers from the bad brokers is those that are proactive versus those that are reactive. I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. Everyone is technically burned out, because at the end of the day, you're burned out because you're watching Netflix every night, or you're burned out, whatever it is. Like, you could be burned out just because your habits are not great habits, and not to just pick on Netflix, but like, or you could be burned out because you're a workaholic, and that's what you're doing. But I think it's finding, like you said, what are you passionate about? And then what's the purpose? And and that's the proactiveness versus the reactive. The reactive is just being burned out because you don't have purpose. And I like what you were saying when we were talking about just some like really popular people in culture and some really popular podcasts where the message is go hard all the time. Like, you just need to go hard. And it's like, if you're not running 100 miles and on a broken leg or whatever, then there's something wrong with you. So it's like on steroids of what you were saying about we need to do hard things. It's just like beating yourself up to beat yourself up is this idea. And then there's the people that they're kind of like the victim mentality. And I'm borrowing your words from earlier, but it's like, life's against me. There's nothing I can do. AI's coming. I won't be able to get a job. So I'm just going to kind of resign myself to that fact now. And I like how you were saying, like, neither one of those is right. And what's interesting is I've seen people try to be both of those at the same time. A lot of times you see that with like New Year's resolutions. It's like, for the first 60 days of the year, I'm going to like work out 3 times a day and do these other like 6 things. And it's like, that's never going to happen. But like, I actually saw this happen recently. And then it's like the rest of the year, I'm just going to go back to just not doing anything. It's like these opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think that's where the idea of balance is interesting to talk about, but also to say that you can never really fully be balanced too, because I think it's more about finding your purpose and then prioritization of your purpose. So interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to say. I think one thing that, I hear a lot of people talking about now is that stress isn't necessarily bad. I think and that maybe goes back to the whole idea of, if on one side you have like work-life balance is what we want, and which is, you think of as like low stress, that's really important. On the other side, you have like go hard every day, work all the time, achieve. And so, but I think what's interesting is if you are living based on your values, what's important to you, there's a sense of meaning and purpose that's driving you, that there's a sense where stress is not necessarily a negative thing. And I think there's some people I respect have been talking about this, where I think stress becomes toxic is where people are in a place where there's not meaning and purpose, and where life is kind of a drudgery, and where they're not achieving anything, and where it's just, things are just hard, but there's nothing good that's happening. I think we can speak to the fact when we're building something, there's a lot of excitement that we have about it. And it might mean that you're, for a period of time, you're not sleeping as much, or you're having more meetings, or you're thinking about it. There's a level of stress there. And you could compare it to an exercise. An exercise is hard. It does put stress on the body. A good exercise will stress your muscles. It will stress your heart a little bit, but it's a hermetic stress. It's good for you if it's done if it's not overdone. And so I think that not necessarily avoiding stress, but saying what is worth living for, what is worth striving for and pressing into. And that's why we're alive. I mean, we want that, and so I think when you look at the work-life balance or they go hard all the time, I think they're both wrong. They're both almost kind of polar opposites that you don't want to really be in either camp. But I think at the same time, there's no way to really be balanced, completely balanced, and then achieve something that's really important to you, that's going to be something exceptional, that's something unusual, that's not just something average. If you want to be average, then maybe you can kind of have this balance where you don't really push hard on anything. But if you want to do something exceptional, you're going to have to be out of balance in some ways. And I think that the key is having values that kind of constrains that doesn't become unhealthy, because we've seen it very unhealthy, especially in the business world. We were talking about a guy yesterday that I won't use his name. He's a guy we like a lot, but very successful in business, but not healthy. And you were saying you hadn't seen him in a while. And you're like, man, he wasn't healthy. When I saw him, I was like, wow, I'm noticing some things about him physically, and it just jumped out at you. And so it's you want to be healthy in your body. You do want to get good sleep. You do want to work out. You do want to have a healthy heart, have a healthy brain. You want to have a healthy diet. You want to have a healthy marriage. You want to have healthy kids that you're spending time with. You want to have a healthy business, have healthy relationships and friendships. That's all values based. Those things are all important to me. So I'm making decisions based on what's valuable to me, which means that there are going to be times where I go super hard in certain areas that may look out of balance because those things are important to me.
Yeah, that's good. And as you're talking, I think what you said earlier about being willing to do hard things is important. Not to the standpoint of Goggins hard things, way too hard for the sake of it, but it's not going to be easy to do what you just said. You're going to have to make decisions that are going to be maybe contrary to, for example, if you really do want to prioritize your family and you want to go on a trip with your family, you want to get away, or you want to take them on a mission trip, or you want to just spend more time with them, you're going to have to maybe say no to other things. And I think a lot of times it's what we're saying no to, and that can be hard. But we get, I think, in this cycle of feeling like we have to keep all of our options open and always say yes. And by saying yes to too many things, that's the whole reactive part. You're not being proactive. And ultimately, all the people that you care the most about are the ones that are losing, because you're saying yes to all these other things. And so I think a lot of people, that's the life that's being lived, is this life of I'm not in control. I just kind of have to go along constantly with everything. So, it's just making decisions to maybe set some boundaries and say, this is what I want to prioritize, and being okay with that, and being able to have hard conversations too. Because I think sometimes it's just going to be conversations, whether that's with business partners or whoever it is, to say this is really important to me right now. And it could have a financial impact too. But that type of a life over the life of just begrudgingly, being committed and doing something that you don't want to do, and kind of getting the joy sucked out of you because you're just, you're showing up every day and you're burned out and you're stressed in an unhealthy way, which probably is going to kill you early. That's a really sad life to live, because that's actually a choice. You don't have to do that. But a lot of people kind of get on that hamster wheel. Yeah. And that's the life that they're living.
Yeah. It's people have talked about how, life is actually easier when you're disciplined and you do some hard things than when you try and live a life of comfort and not do anything hard. When you live that life, everything actually gets really hard. And if you think back historically, how people had to work hard physically. Literally, you had to go out and work in the fields. You had to go plant things. You had to go harvest things. You had to go kill animals and hunt, and it was a very hard physical life. You were being exposed to elements, heat and cold and all these things, and the weather, and conflict, maybe not always being safe. And we have become so comfortable and so weak in a lot of ways. We have all of our little comforts. You mentioned Netflix. So many people are, they're being entertained all the time, and they're not being pushed or not being stressed. And so I think there is a healthy aspect to like David Goggins, that kind of whole side. I think we both agree, maybe he's not a healthy, happy person, because he's just going so far. But the reason that people are drawn to that is because we're so far the opposite direction as a culture. It's interesting, even the testosterone numbers, if you look at men, a young man today in his 20s has the same testosterone as a man in his 60s had in the 80s. So literally, like, these young men, their testosterone is low. And testosterone is the hormone of achievement, of drive, of going and being assertive and accomplishing things. And we have just become comfortable. People aren't physically fit. People are sitting on the couch. People are, if you look at just ordering food in now, Uber Eats, these different apps, it's like, I don't want to have to do anything hard. I want everything just catered to me. I'll spend extra money to make things convenient. We're so far on that end of the spectrum. And I think we'll continue to go that way. We talked about AI at the beginning, how with AI, you don't have to really think anymore. I mean, you don't have to go learn anything because AI just will tell you, And so we're going all the way that way. So I think we are attracted to these men that we see or women that we see who do go hard and do achieve things and are physically fit, and they go accomplish these things because there's something in the human spirit that desires that, that there's this capability that we have. We have a good friend, Scott Davis, who ran, I think, like 70 marathons or 80 marathons last year. And, one thing he says, he's like, you can do so much more than you think you can do, because some of those marathons, he ran all over the world in the Arctic and Antarctica. And sometimes he was sick, had the flu, and he was still running. But it's like your body, you are capable of so much more. I think there's part of us that wants that, that desires that doesn't want to just be the safe person on the couch, watching other people do that, or the person in the stands. We want to be the guy out there on the field, but then most of us don't want to do what actually took the guy who's out there on the field performing, what he had to go through, to go do that. And so that's what I'm trying to help Luke, and that I challenge myself with that, because there are a lot of times I don't want to go do that. I don't want to work out today, or I don't want to go, make this call or do this meeting or do whatever, because I don't feel like it, but part of this is taking that step of growth to go do that.
Yeah, no, that's good. There's a lot there that you said that was really good. I think that, if we had more of that, if we have more of us stepping up and trying to find what we are passionate about and what our purpose is, there'd be a lot more fulfillment for people. Because I think it's sad how, you read different books, there's different studies on just how much people hate their jobs and hate their work, but they feel stuck and they don't know what else to do. And a lot of it is this, the vicious cycle of you've set up your life a certain way, what your expenses, whatever it is, where you don't feel like you can make a change. And so you get to that point where you're just kind of stuck, and I think that being willing to really evaluate and think about like what is most important. And so then you'll hear about the people that, they like sell everything and they go and they get on a boat and they're like going around the world with their family. Like, whoa. So you hear about people doing hard things and you hear about people doing things way outside the box. And it's like, I could never do that. And it's not to say you should do that, but it's also to say like, but what are you passionate about and what is your purpose? And if life is more than just like showing up at a job 5 days a week just because, it's like, how has God gifted you and why are you on this earth is a huge question, right? And I think what'll be interesting about AI is because it is thinking for us, and because Elon's building robots and all the stuff going on, there's kind of this belief that, there'll be utopian prosperity. And if there is, it's like, what are people going to actually replace the achievement and all that with? Because if there's not going to be as much to achieve, I've heard a lot of people talk about this on podcasts. If in the future, and we could be talking about a long time from now, but if in the future there's just less to achieve because so much of it's dialed in with all of this artificial intelligence, then, what's going to get people motivated and kind of up in the morning? And that's something that's so important. Studies have always shown that like the reason that retirement age was retirement age and the companies could do pensions was because like people would retire at 65 and they would die like 3 years later. Because as soon as they stopped working, they stopped having like a reason to get up, because there's so much of their identity was tied to their work.
Yeah.
And so you could pay pensions because people weren't living like 30 more years. And I've always been really intrigued by our grandpa who, lived into his mid 90s and did so many of the things just naturally in his life that they talk about now as being so important for longevity, like cold showers every morning. He was always lifting. He also had tons of hobbies that he was really interested in. And he, really involved with people that were younger than him. Like he would do a lot of college ministry stuff. He was always hiking, outdoor, all these things that they would say, you got to challenge yourself socially. You got to continue to learn. You got to continue to adapt, stay healthy. He was doing all those things. But if you stop doing those things, and if that's kind of where we continue to go as a culture, because I think that's what you're talking about with people get into the habits of, never cooking at home, never spending time together. It's always in front of a screen. It's interacting on social media, whatever it is. Those are just going to have really negative long-term impacts.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between growth and atrophy. If you're not growing, then there's atrophy, and it's very easy to see in a physical sense. If you don't lift, your muscles get weaker, then you can't lift as much when you try and lift. And we were talking yesterday about like what's the secret sauce of our business? Is it software technology? Is it these AI tools, or is it the way we do buy a rep or whatever? Kind of name all these different things that are things that we've developed that we think we have an edge on that's different from our competition that we think makes us better. But what we said was the secret sauce is really it's our ability to adapt and change, and that we're always reinventing ourselves. And if you look at our company, if you look at it every maybe 2 years, or in some cases 18 months, it's almost like a different company. If you look at through the years, how like the way we do things, and we've had these big things that we've changed, like the podcast, or starting Ascent to go do investments and raise money, and things that we didn't necessarily have a background in or experience in, and we had to just go figure it out. Like, we want to do this, we believe in this, we think it's a good idea, but we're gonna have to go figure out how to do it. And it's going to be a big growth thing for us, and it's going to be stressful, and it's going to be hard, and there's a risk we could fail, and putting yourself in that kind of position is where real growth happens. And it's super fun and exciting. I think we both love that and thrive off that. And we don't really thrive off just being the same forever and just doing the same thing over and over again. But I think that is so critical, especially now in the world right now. You cannot just kind of dial everything in and just like coast. You always have to be questioning, how can I grow? How can we change things? What was optimal, 6 months ago or a year ago that's now suboptimal? How do we get better in this area? How do we challenge ourselves? And we're very imperfect at doing that. It's not like we have it figured out, but I think the reason that we are not content with where we are, there's a really healthy place to not be content with where you are, which I would say is just being comfortable. If you're comfortable, then you're not growing, you're atrophying. So how do you continue to grow and challenge yourself and challenge your team to grow?
Yeah, that's good. That's a ton of work, and it's hard, because I was thinking as you were talking about some areas that I've tried to push myself recently. We have a property up in the mountains in Colorado, and I've tried to learn a ton about, like tractors and working outdoors, and I've been using all this equipment that I've never used before, and that's like so different. Then my background and, us growing up together is more like sports and like a lot of like exercising and working out, but that's all controlled environment. And then obviously being in real estate, which is like in the office and, meetings and calls. And so then when you're doing like physical labor like this and then like mechanical work, with tractors and stuff like that, it's just so different. And then I've also really been trying to learn as much as I can about, software and AI. And so then that's like a completely different area as well. And what I've found from it is it's just like exhausting. Like when you have to learn something new, it just like hurts your brain, and you just naturally don't want to do it. At least that's how I am. It's like naturally there's just something that's like, it's really kind of intimidating to think like, can I actually do this? Am I going to be able to get the tractor going and go move this stuff over here and like change out and like, it sounds like really daunting, and then you just have to go do it. And part of it, I think, is I'm so used to things just happening so easily and quickly, like being able to go on your app and order something and it just shows up, that when you actually have to go and spend like 3 hours troubleshooting something, it's extremely frustrating because there's like no other area in your life that you're like 3 hours troubleshooting something. So
well, I think that
it's
for
hard.
most of us, and this is like the whole like thing with New Year's resolutions, there's a moment of motivation and excitement. I need to go do this thing. Like you're saying, you're up in the mountains. It's like, I need to go get a tractor and I need to go like do this work. What's actually really hard is the time between, that motivation in achieving the work. It's the fall through. This is uncomfortable because I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm doing it wrong, and I made mistakes, and I did it wrong, so I got to do it over again, or I got to learn this. And I don't want to learn this because I know it's boring. But that is the part we're talking about. That's the hard part, and that's the part that all of us have to lean into. And there's so much benefit to that. I personally hate that because I kind of have this ADD mindset where I get excited about things, and if I'm excited about it, I'm all in. I'm going to go do it. But if I'm not excited about it, it's hard. Like I remember when we set up this studio, I set up a lot of it myself. And I'm not a tech person at all. So I didn't want to learn about any of this equipment or how to, where to plug stuff in or whatever. And Brad helped me a lot with it virtually. But, sometimes you just have to go do the hard thing, because there's something on the other side. There's a vision you have of this is where we could be as a company, or this is where we could be in our marriage or, our family. And that is on the other side. But I have to go do the thing that's super uncomfortable, that I feel like I'm bad at. And one more example for me that's just, I'm living through right now, going from bench pressing with a barbell that I can do without really feeling tired, because neurologically, I've had this connection to that bar path. It's super easy. Going to dumbbell pressing, I was like, I can't believe how hard this is on me. I'm not even pressing like a lot of weight. I think I could press more, but like, because I'm not neurologically connected to the bar path, it's like my brain is having to really focus on every part of the movement and calibrate it. And it's making me tired. I'm tired mentally. I'm tired physically. I feel like I'm out of breath. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Some of these things, you go from being really good at being in the office doing real estate to going and doing something on a tractor. And the temptation is, well, I should just go hire someone to do this because I don't need to do this. I can't figure this out. But there's so much benefit in you figuring out and doing it.
Yeah. And I think that, I think it's interesting to think about motivation and how often fear is a big part of the motivation in a negative way, like being afraid of making a mistake or just the fear of negative consequences or things happening. Just like not wanting to have to deal with anything negative. I think that a lot of times I'll realize what's holding me back from things I know I should just be doing, things that are going to be hard, is like not trusting God that He's in control of the situation and that He's allowing me to go through these situations, and it's gonna make me better. I'm gonna get stronger through it by going through these situations. And it's a lot of times it's from a very selfish place, because you don't want to have a hard conversation with somebody because you're not really thinking about them. Because actually you need to have that conversation so you can be honest with them on the situation and what's going on. And that would be better for both of you. But again, fear of like, well, what are the implications going to be? And so that's a big area. But I think being willing to adapt and challenge yourself, and hopefully for our audience, a lot of what you're thinking about is, as we're talking, is there something completely different that you're thinking about that you've always wanted to do, or you wish you could do, or you'd like to do. And I think, Tim, those books you gave me last year by Dan Sullivan, like 10X is greater than 2X, and Who Not How, and then The Gap Over the Gain. Those were really good books to just think about. He helps business leaders thinking about like where you are and where you could be. And a lot of it is around, he's big on like, do what you want to do. Because a lot of people just get in this situation where they've been successful, they're doing well, but they hate it and they're just not enjoying it. And it's like, if you can make a change to do what you want to do, because you're going to be so much more fulfilled if you're actually pursuing the dreams that God's given you versus just kind of trudging through something, feeling like you have to.
Yeah, a lot of it is the fear of failure and the fear of rejection that I think we all struggle with. And I think in a very real way, to accomplish something, especially something that's very meaningful to you, you have to risk failure and you have to risk some level of rejection. And sometimes there's a little bit more perception of how significant that is than what truly is. Like, it may not be as big of a risk as maybe you in your mind it is, but there's real risk there. And it was interesting reading about Rockefeller. I read a book a couple weeks ago that he wrote to his son, letters to his son, and he talks a lot about failure in that book. And here's probably one of the most successful businessmen in history. who just crushed it, but talking about how much he personally failed and how much he had to learn from failure, learn from making mistakes, and then going back and going again, and trying again, and pursuing the things he wanted to pursue again. And anyone who's successful from the outside, it might look easy, like, oh, they're just always successful, they always make money, they always do deals. But I think we can tell people. There's been so many times we've made mistakes and we've gone forward something and being like, you know what, this was kind of right, but we should have done it differently. And we had to recalibrate all the time, and change what we were doing, change our goals, change what we were pursuing. And, that's part of success, is going to be a lot of big failures and small failures that are kind of mixed in, but not letting those things stop you, but learning from those things and then going forward with that new knowledge to try something else.
Well, and I think what you're talking about is we've really enjoyed getting to be entrepreneurs, like getting to make changes, not being a really, really large company where we couldn't make changes and we're kind of stuck with the way things are and things were. And I think that that's something I've heard from a lot of these podcasts back to AI, is just that the future is going to be a lot more entrepreneurship, a lot more using the tools and just, people going out and pursuing the things that they want to do in the areas that they think they can add value. And so I think for like young kids, that's going to be a big opportunity. It'll be hard to go kind of read a playbook as a young kid now, but I think that it's going to be more, kids like Luke thinking about how can they add value? How can they use these tools? There's still going to be plenty of opportunity to do that, but it's not going to probably be in the traditional sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe a good thing for the audience to think about is, what are your values? What's truly important to you? And are you living your life on what is important and what you really want, or on what makes you feel comfortable and what's easy? And I think if I'm honest, there's a lot of things in my life that are comfortable and that are easy. And there's things that you can peel out of your life that aren't really helping you, but they make you comfortable, but they're actually working against achieving what you want to achieve. And so I think just being honest with yourself about, what is important and why, and where am I growing and where am I not growing? And, if there's things like, alcohol, or we've talked about Netflix a lot, or, these things that all of us struggle with that are, maybe fun things, or they make us comfortable, or we can enjoy them. And maybe in moderation, they're great, but there are things that can start to creep in, and we can become more and more comfortable in those things. And they're actually holding us back from the life we want to live, from the relationships we want to have, from the health that we want to have. And so, what are those things for you? And make it about the values of what do you want and what is going to actually benefit and bless your life? Because I think we could agree that, just being really successful in business is probably not a good value if that's the only thing that's valuable to you. Mm-hmm. Your faith is important, your marriage is important, your family is important. Think holistically about your life. What does health look like? But go really live your life. I think don't be held back. Don't be sitting there doing things just to make yourself comfortable and not living the life you could be living.
Yeah, and I think I think that's good. And I think just going a little deeper on that, if you go and you live your life just for yourself, that's going to be empty too.
Yeah.
So, I think that there's the things like faith and family and values, back to what you said about values, it's such an important governor on the whole thing, because God does give us passions and dreams, and there's things that he has put us on this earth to do. And it's not just to sit around. I think that's what we're saying. It's not to sit around. It's to get up and to go and to achieve. And I just think remembering that it's also not just about anything, you selfishly want to do, but it's really thinking through what are my values, what's important to me, and what's a bigger purpose. Like if I'm reading my eulogy later, do I want to read about how I, didn't really do anything, accomplish anything, take any chances, any of that? Or do I want to read about how I did all these things, but I had no family, no friends. It was just about me, And so it's finding what's the purpose that God's put you on this earth for, and then, like you said, pursuing that.
Yeah, it needs to be something bigger than yourself. That's about community, about other people, something you do in community. I think one of the things that's most fun for me is doing it with you, with Tripp, with David. Having these big things we want to accomplish, things we want to fix sometimes in the company that we think are broken, and then figuring it out together and pursuing it together. There's so much value in that. That's so important. It's really a blessing to get to do that, And so I think that's a really, really important point. Do it in community. Do it not for yourself, but do it for others. And then I love what you said about dreams. I think that so many people, we have dreams when we're young, when we're growing up. And sometimes those are great, but not necessarily things we want to pursue the rest of our life. But what are your dreams? What are your passions? I think people don't allow themselves to even think like that. They think, oh, I've got to a point now where I just have to do this, and I can't have dreams anymore, or that was silly, and it's like, no, what do you really enjoy? You have one life to live, go pursue those things. And I think, I know you've done that Dreammaker weekend with Jackie, at least maybe 2 or 3 times, Tom, but I've done that with Kristen as well. And getting together for a weekend with your spouse and saying, what are your dreams? What are my dreams? What's important to us? What do we really value? And it's amazing the things that come out of that maybe feel kind of outside the box, but things like, I know for you guys, it was probably buying your place in Colorado, it's probably one of those things. But, these big kind of movements that you make to pursue things together that do take effort and do cause stress, but it's going towards something that is a passion that you have.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, this is good, Tim. Good topic and a fun one to talk through and think about. And it's challenging, I know, to both of us. And then hopefully it's encouraging to the audience listening, because I think life can be so much more exciting than just kind of getting caught up and reacting to, the latest show that's coming out, or the newest restaurant, that's coming out, or whatever it is, just the things that you just kind of start doing on repeat. And instead taking a more proactive approach and control of your life, and remembering it's going fast and we only have one life to live. So living a life of purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been fun. It's a good conversation.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.